Bunina, Director, Silicon Foundry, Qatar. We have Ibrahim Nasibov, Country Representative at Whitehill Capital. Walid Tarabih, Founder of Relik and PlatX. Khalid Tattan, Founder and Managing Partner, 1K Leaders. Yasser Biaz, CEO, Founder of Global Cyber Partners.
Okay, welcome everyone to our humble panel today. Thank you for joining. I will leave some time for questions, so prepare some. But we have a very interesting panel today on building digital economy bridges between Central Asia, Middle East, and Caucasus to really unite the markets and create one cohesive digital economy. I will go through our dear panelists today. We have Ibrahim Nasibov, country representative of Whitehill Capital, where he works at the intersection of innovation and investment. He helps startups from the Caucasus and Central Asia expand into new markets and build meaningful partnerships across the region, such as GCC, very active in Saudi Arabia. Khalid Tattan, founder and managing partner, Leaders Lane, where he helps startups with global expansion as well, building on his previous venture builder, 1K Leaders. Previous to that, he was a founder of trade and supply chain finance division at Kuwait Finance House, and he led deals for over 1.5 billion USD at HSBC Group. Walid Tarabih, founder of Relik and PlatX, and a former advisor to the UAE Prime Minister's office, and a serial entrepreneur focused on building trust in the digital space and authenticity in a fakeable world. He combines government experience with the startup mentality to create technologies that protect truth, heritage, and human legacy. And last but not least, Yasser Biaz, CEO and founder of Global Cyber Partners. Prior to his current technology entrepreneurial ventures, Yasser founded and managed the first university-centric deep tech VC firm in Africa, funded by corporate. He co-developed a global incubator with MIT, a joint accelerator with Plug and Play, and an international deep tech ecosystem, and a technology transfer office. And yours truly, Kate Bunina. I'm a director of Silicon Foundry in Qatar and running accelerator at Qatar Development Bank, currently stationed in Qatar, and I have been in digital economy for 14 years right now. So very passionate about how to create one big market out of the mentioned regions. So to start with, looking at the common digital market in those regions, we need to understand what is working and what is not working right now. And I want to start with the perception of what does single digital market even means and how we can enable it. Ibrahim, would you like to start?
So that's actually an interesting question. Thanks for starting with this point, because it's very understand what we are talking, how we approach the situation before actually deep dive into the situation. From our organization's perspective, single digital market means to make digital goods services accessible without any border. Imagine like startups, companies, and individuals get access to different kind of digital services, products, and networks of different countries without leaving their original place, which includes like registration of the company, expanding their business, or getting different kind of access to different services provided by each government, organization, or corporation. And that includes the combination of infrastructure, legislation, and, to be honest, talent and knowledge exchange.
Still working. Yes, Walid. Single digital market, what does it mean? What do you think enables it to truly work, especially from your experience with Prime Minister, but also as an entrepreneur working globally? And we are, just to remind you, we are focusing on Central Asia and Middle East, so we don't count the US here.
So thank you so much for having me. And I think, as I mentioned, I wear multiple hats. And when I was in the government, what really allowed me to jump into the startup world, that the UAE government have a very special kind of mentality of thinking. So number one is start from a vision and specific domain, like government services. And then you have the execution layer. So you might have a vision or a dream, and this is a startup, so you have an idea, and if you don't know how to execute on this idea, then your dream will just collapse. So that's similar in the government. So you have this grand vision that you want to be number one in something, and then if you don't have an execution layer that can take this forward and take it for a long period of time, then the whole thing will collapse. So having a strategy that reflects how government think is essential, and it's inevitable in the government. What we did in the government as a startup, we take, for example, if you take government services, we take a startup in terms of like who's the best startup in terms of government of services. And that case was Amazon. And we take Amazon's strategy and we try to apply it in the government to put the citizen-centric government and see how Amazon is running the government, so how this government will look like. And funny enough, the strategy of Amazon was very simple. It was based on a question that says what is not going to change in the coming 10 years. So they define something called critical constants. And they say, okay, in 10 years, they want more products, more variety of products. They want less prices and faster. So Amazon don't see in 10 years somebody's coming and say, I want a slower delivery of my shipment, right? Similarly, in the government, we find that the three critical constants for citizens is they want to more proactive services. So they want the services to come to them. They want to have more reliable services. Services will not break in the middle. It will be delivered on time and so on. And they want to have more availability. Because if you are a government, you don't have a segment of citizens that you need to choose from. You need to cater from everyone from birth to death, right? You cannot exclude anyone from the state. So that's how the government start thinking on a strategic level. So now if you bring any project on government services and you want to apply your rules on it, you say, okay, what is it? Is it proactive service, or is it a reliability for the service, or is it like a more availability for service? So if I bring a kiosk to deliver government documents, they will say, okay, because it's going to add another channel of delivery. So that's how we start thinking on a strategic level in terms of how we can execute from a government that think like a startup. The third level was the execution layer. Like how can we break these barriers between government entities? And I'm sure all of your countries have the same. You have these, what they call the ecosystem. It's not the ecosystem, right? Everyone have his own data. Everyone don't want to share. Yeah, they have their security. They have their duplicate of data. In order to lower the barriers and to let these people to speak for the greater value and to put the citizen first, it's two folds. Number one, what are the KPIs that you're measuring, right? Sometimes we look at the wrong KPI and we think we're doing something good, but to take an example is like a city in Arizona, Tempe, if I remember correctly. It was public transportation. And the KPI for public transportation is to get from point A to point B in a city in 20 minutes. So I don't care if you take the bus or the taxi or anything. My job as a government is to get you from any point to any point in this city in 20 minutes. And Tokyo airports is getting from the airplane to the door in 4 minutes. So these are good KPIs for the citizen, not for the government. It doesn't care about how many workers are there or whatever. They care about how we make our citizen more happy. So we created a program called Government Accelerators, which is similar to Startup, which is an 100 days program. And then you have a challenge and you bring like 3-4 ministries, different ministries, from the minister level all the way to the employees. And they work from that space for 100 days to get this challenge solved. And this is benchmark against multiple different countries to make sure that a government can operate like a startup, if this makes sense.
That's incredible. And we see the success of it in UAE and how it's operating in terms of digital economy. And I must say that the example that you gave, ministries submitting the problems and then the public or the startup solving it, was also used in Czech Republic by the government. And it was very successful to the point that they created a standalone NGO for it. So I would love to see more of that in Central Asia being done as well. I will come back in terms of how you see the government working better in GCC, what can be used in Central Asia, and for Ibrahim, you as well, giving your background in government. But I want to move to Khalid in terms of what do you see in terms of the digital market, because you're a lot on investment side, on entrepreneurship, on venture building. What do you see in terms of building that bridge between GCC and Central Asia from GCC standpoint?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's lovely to be here. The city is quiet, rich with culture. And I met so much of amazing people. And it's my first time in Baku. So thanks for having us. With regards to investment, so if you look at what is the main benefit of Eurasian countries over here, and specifically Baku, you will have it's quite rich with regards to the talent, with the technical depth, which we all know that. But let me speak about something that not many people speak about, which is the challenges in terms of how we will be able to create cross-border synergies, how we will be able to scale in terms of towards the GCC. The main reason when it comes to the GCC capital, why we're not, or let's say they were kind of preserved in terms of that is because of the early stage ecosystems when it comes to the vagueness of it. But what does that means is there is a lot of opportunities when it comes to post-funding structure. So what does it mean? Let me put it an example. So let's say a startup over here in Baku would like to expand its regional presence in the GCC. What we do is we look at the GCC as one single country and then leverage on each country based on its arm strength. So, for example, saying that the Baku startup would like to go to the GCC, they would have Bahrain as an open gateway, and they would establish and incorporate their entity over there, and not only to leverage on the talent, but also leverage on the government subsidies that we will be able to provide. And once this is set up, then what we will be able to do is leveraging on between the frameworks among Bahrain and Saudi, where we will be able to scale the Bahraini startups all the way towards Saudi with having cost efficiency and subsidies towards that. Then later, subsequently, in terms of attracting further investment, we will be able to capitalize on the UAE, for example, in terms of investment vehicles, such as like ADGM, such as like the IFC, where we will be able to open and operate SPVs over there. So it's all about value creation in terms of having this regional corridors. At the same time, we leave the IP and the main headquarters here at Baku. So it's more or less of an expansion plans in terms of after creating that, so what comes next? The second phase is to have these joint cross-border synergies where we will be able to have joint funds among GCC investors, and not only that, but also Euro-Asian investors at the same time. So this is the way where at Leaders Lane, where we operate, what we do is we provide the necessary tools in terms of tailored advisory and business optimization to smart scale and de-risk the ventures to attract investments and make the startup as an investable ready-made product.
Incredible insight. That's exactly what we want with this panel, is not to talk only about that we need to create the bridges between, but what are the actionable insights and steps. So here we heard joint venture fund, enabling and preparing startups before going to the market, and more. And I will get back to this with Ibrahim later on, because I want to hear your insight from being in Central Asia, investing in Central Asia, and what do you see really made a difference in terms of startups transitioning to GCC? Because Khalid brings a lot of knowledge and insight in the market already, but that connection between them is important. But Yasser, I don't want to leave you out in terms of digital markets and connections between them.
Actually, I just wanted to sort of like free-wing a perspective, if it makes sense.
Please do.
Because I know that, as far as, there's a lot of talk about, how to attract GCC investment into the Central Eurasian region. And I think that the case is a lot more reciprocal than that, and it deserves to be said, because I heard many, many times that, essentially you have access to cheap talent here, or at least that you have the talent, you have, that you have a competitive cost structure, shared business culture, and time zone compatibility. But I think that it leaves out a lot of the context that, I think that we can leverage at least to show the symmetry in between these two relationships. So on the side of the GCC countries, you have capital, you have scale know-how, and you have an advanced framework, policy frameworks. And you have vision, and that vision is based on, economic diversification. So I would like to match that reciprocally on the other side, by, matching the capital with the deep, STEM base, going back to, Soviet academic tradition. You also have a lot of infrastructure upgrade, right? On the skill know-how, so let me just stay on capital. You have also connectivity, physical and fiber. You have energy. So you have a lot that can cater to the investment. So that's why I'm always looking for that symmetry. In the case of skill know-how, there's just, obviously the startups next door, and there is a burgeoning ecosystem, and infrastructure is being upgraded. So that skill know-how will be extremely useful. Now, on the advanced regulatory frameworks, GCC, will match it here with, a lot of, reforms are actually taking place. And finally, those visions, the number of like visions 2030, 2031, 2035 in the GCC have an organic match here because, obviously it's been stated, formally that, the countries are seeking, economic diversification. And so there's that willingness and there's that market. And so the only thing I will add is because for longest time as investors, we were looking for essentially one hub to essentially, get the investment and to essentially, IPO. But now, and honestly, for the last couple of days, I've given it a lot of thought and a lot of look. And I think that the GCC countries or region has become truly like an IPO hub that you would want to aspire to. So that's why I don't think it's a matter of, the region going and fetching investment there. I would love to see that the GCC region also understand that there is like an organic opportunity here.
Those are great insights. Thank you, Yasser. I want Ibrahim to follow up on this with what Yasser highlighted. What are the other things that you see, not only in terms of what are the opportunities in Central Asia from the GCC perspective, but what are the challenges for Central Asian and Caucasus startups expanding to GCC, because you are focusing on that with many of them through White Hill Capital?
Yeah, actually, that's very interesting question. So before answering this question, I would like to give some background information about what we are doing in GCC. So we are a Central Asian based fund, and when we invested in the startups, we saw that this market is not very scalable. So the startups needs to go to some other markets to be successful. And there are a few opportunities. One of them is Europe, which is quite legislative country. One of them is US, which is quite competitive. The other one is Southeast Asia, which is not very close to the Central Asia in terms of the cultural background. And in this regard, we found Central Asia startups can go easily to GCC. Not easily let's say this is the most interesting target, because as it was mentioned by Yasser, Gulf has the capital, which is very important, and they have know-how and they have very interesting vision about the future in terms of the technological development. We started this year to expand Central Asian startups to GCC with some acceleration programs. So we provide soft landing support, we provide mentorship, we provide warm introductions to investors, to some kind of, let's say, corporations, large holdings, which can be their partners. We started in Saudi with 8 startups. Now we are doing another acceleration program in Dubai with the corporation of Dubai International Finance Center, 10 startups from Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. And we actually, during the last GITEX, launched our new innovation hub in DIFC, which was supported by IT Park and Astana Hub. IT Park is a government organization of Uzbekistan, while Astana Hub from Kazakhstan, which is actually shows an important point when it comes to the challenges and opportunities. Central Asian countries, and also it includes the Caucasus as well, should put a lot of energy in terms of the government perspective. So government should actually initiate this movement from this area to Gulf. Otherwise, it is just some organizations which are trying to do, which is not resulting in a very good result. On the other hand, when it comes to the specifically startups, so there are a few points. One of them is actually knowing the market, which is actually, I believe, Khalid can help us in next cohort, because we need really someone who actually tried and failed in the region. And when startups comes from Central Asia to Saudi and UAE, which is quite new markets, they face an important challenge, which is mentioned by Walid, ecosystem. So these guys are actually very successful in Central Asia and in UAE or Saudi or any Central Asian country. So they need a different approach, but they follow the same approach they have previously, which results not quite good expanding. And also it's very important to note that it's a new market for Central Asian startups in terms of challenge, and it results very long sales cycles for them, especially in B2B side. So even though these are very quite interesting challenges, we have already succeed some interesting stories. For example, one of the startups that we expand into Saudi, now another partner of us take it from Saudi and expanding them into US, a new market. The same happens in UAE. We helped some startups to go UAE, and some of our partners now taking them from UAE into North Africa, which is like another like untapped market in this regard. One of the interesting challenge in this regard is joint funds, which is still mentioned by Khalid, and I guess we need to a little bit deep dive into that point. Since we don't have like very strong success stories, joint funds are not working in this, like, let's say years. But the more we will have success stories, the more we will have joint funds or syndicates, which will enable the startups to open some like new capital resources. As of now, when the startups from Central Asia goes to Gulf, so still there is some bias, let's say like challenges for them to raise money. But once we have success stories which will result in joint funds, actually I believe we will have this issue or less.
May I add on top of what Ibrahim? First of all, thank you, Ibrahim, for thinking highly of us. So just taking a step back. First of all, with regards to this region and with regards to Azerbaijan, the Eurasian countries, we do resonate a lot on values and principles. So speaking from a human element, from in terms of workability, from in terms of mindset, all of that, we're quite there, we're quite similar. That's what I noticed. And specifically that I did visited some different countries, and I've seen there is the passion, there is the talent, and you do guys have what it takes in order to scale, not only from a Gulf perspective, but also on a global level. So speaking of that, and in continuation to what the great work that you've been doing, Ibrahim, in terms of incubating the startups of the GCC, as I mentioned earlier, it's always there is a vagueness in terms of, okay, if I invest as a GCC investor, what's in it for me? What's the post-funding support? How can we do that? So what do? We create value. How do we create value? We look at the startup as, we put the startup on a roadmap. And then once we put the startup on a roadmap, it's going to be as a visionary thing that we are here from the long-term perspective. And by doing this, it's creating the entire ecosystem by providing them the tools, the resources, and providing them the tailored advisors, where we will be able to provide them access to different kind of multinational advisors and also local advisors for basically the startup success. Once we do that, and trust me, Ibrahim, that I've seen also, like once we do that, we keep the startup on a sustainable roadmap. There is no way when the Gulf capital would meet the talents of Eurasia, it won't be a success. It's the contrary. It's actually gonna result in a huge success, and not only from the Gulf, and perhaps even from the Gulf to even other markets, and then different in a global stage.
I'd like to comment on few initiatives that are maybe ideas on how government of the UAE is trying to push the startup market. And one of the things that was launched 3 weeks ago was a program called Startup Capital of the World. So they want UAE to be the startup capital of the world. And this is not only by saying this, so by offering startups some low barrier entry to the market. This included in Dubai Future Foundation and AI accelerators of Dubai Future Foundation. And this is important because what they do, they bring the startup. If you have a relevant solution for the government, and yesterday my friend Abdullah from Qatar was saying that they want the government to work with a startup, but for a startup to register in the procurement system of a government is kind of impossible. So the procurement system is not friendly for startup. They cannot afford the payment terms of the government. They cannot afford to pay the performance bond and the tender bond and all the standard that the government put. So how you want the startup to lose 90% of the market, which is the purchase of the government, and you want them to flourish in your market if you don't lower that barrier to entry. So one very interesting fact that Abdullah was suggesting a project, I don't know if it's confidential or not, but you can ask him. So that's a very interesting idea that Abdullah came up with. But in the UAE, what they do, they bring startups to specific challenges for the government entity. So let's assume that you're working with oil and gas, you're working with electricity, whatever startup you're in, they match you with a government entity on MOU basis. You say, okay, this is the challenge of the government, this is your startup. You work together for 10 weeks, okay? And if you achieve the required outcome of this 10 weeks, then it becomes a contract. And suddenly this startup have his first client and he hit the ground running, right? And it's a government reference. He proved the market fit, he tests his product and it's working. Then it can be like, you can think about it as carving out this startup to offer services to other government entities, which was successful for Estonia. What I wanted to highlight that there is no one size fit all. So what is working in the UAE might not work here and vice versa or any other word. So you need to find your own formula for this to work in your market. The third point is for government to think as a VC. So if the government is thinking as a VC, that means they have to put multiple bets on different horses, right? So you have these kind of startups. I'm okay to lose 9 of them. If one of them deliver, then this is my next unicorn. So I'm okay to lose some money on some startups if they fail, and that's okay, 100%. It's a VC mentality. So if you adopt this as a government, right, it's okay. Let's try a few things with these people, and the cost of failure can be borne by the government because anyway, it's not going to damage the economy. You're paying salaries for people, you're paying it back to the economy. So it's not a bad thing. One of the things that also to avoid brain drain is like you don't want your talents to leave the country. I've seen a program, I'm not sure which country was it, but if you are a startup and you raised $1 million foreign investment into your startup, the government gonna double that and give you $2 million on top to stay in country and deliver your value from your country. So these are some ideas that you can benefit from or you can replicate if it fits into your market. But I think these are, again, on the government thinking as a startup and vice versa. Nevertheless, the government have much bigger mandate, okay? You need to sometimes change the law, you need to change regulation. There are multiple things in the government. It's like a massive mammoth, right? It's not easy to change. So that's they created something called Reg Lab, which is a regulation lab. That means even if crypto is not regulated, even if metaverse is not regulated, NFT is not regulated, you still can play in that space with the government within 6 months. And then they will check what it takes to change the regulation, basically to fit into the startup. So this is a two-way street between government and startups. Sorry if it was that long.
May I add on top of that as well? Like, yes, you're absolutely right. Because, so while we're speaking to the government of Bahrain, we just launched CBDCs. And with regards to that, the government was mentioning, look, we are open to have the legislation change. We're open to have basically the legislation amended, etc. As long as there is a use case example. Not just this, but also from a personal perspective, when I established the Venture Builder, so we operated in ADGM, and the regulators over there, because we were like a unique kind of venture builder, we were not doing it on a traditional way, and it was unorthodox. So that's why they were like happy to listen to us, for us to pioneer these kind of regulations along with us in a safe environment with them, in order to proceed with what, as Walid says, well, no, there's no one solution that fits all, but it can open the kind of traction to different kind of startups to operate in.
Incredible. I love all the insights. I mean, conversation is just flowing. You don't even need a moderator. With all these insights that you have shared, one of the things that will come up, of course, is shared governmental cybersecurity, because in order to build such infrastructures, in order to really empower the digital economy, there will be a question of, is the data safe? Is something that we are sharing between the regions should be shared or should be kept private? And on cybersecurity, Yasser, I want to give you a mic and share some of your insights into digital cooperation. How can countries in our region collaborate, but also build that sovereign cyber systems that are safe to use? Right. Especially with AI coming up, there's a lot of fraud questions. And Walid, I will come back on the fraud to you as well.
Yeah, thank you. So AI is a different animal. So let's just, tackle, cybersecurity maybe in a more generic kind of matter. So I know that a lot of people, there has been a lot of talk about sovereignty. So I'll try to approach it from a different angle. So sovereignty is control, protection, and governance. And so essentially what we're trying to do is balance between, the trade-offs between trust and sovereignty. And it's a tricky measure, even as individuals, when you're using Google or something like that. I mean, you want for trust to be there, but you don't want too much control. You want a single sign-on. So at the nation-state level, it's trickier. And so the question is, do we have modular, interoperable kind of architectures and system to provide for a secure, seamless data flows, cross-border across the region? And so the way I want to steer at least my comments or my intervention is essentially how to take this discussion from safeguard to enablement. Enablement of what? Boosting investor confidence and, attracting capital. So that's the part of like cybersecurity, kind of enablement, I'm looking for. So I would like to pitch in, 4 thoughts or ideas. So, for example, we could go with decentralized technologies, decentralized and zero trust technologies. And what that will give is essentially remove any dominance from any single entity. So everybody's equal. Everybody can kind of cater to, their local law because you're using a decentralized system and it's blockchain-like. So that could be one approach, or at least one thing, to think through. The other one is open source threat intelligence platforms. And so what this allows for is essentially, transparency and verification for audits. Because if, for example, one country is using a proprietary system and the other one another proprietary system, then they cannot even share what type of threats are mounting. And sometimes, the threat may be mounting there, but to attack me and then to go to somebody else. So this would be good measure. And it's reassuring again to the investors. Another approach, a third kind of like element is kind of like harmonized incident response. And so this prevents from market fragmentation so that everybody responds in the same way. I recall this experience a long time ago in Asia Pac, where, essentially a number of us in the US and, elsewhere, throughout the world, we kind of deployed countermeasures to stop these, DDoS attack, distributed denial of service kind of attacks. And the other operators in these other 2 countries were not part of, that common kind of, incident response team. And so a lot of weird things were happening on their network. And so you want to at least take care of that. The fourth is regional cybersecurity alliance. And this is really important to have, essentially, a common regulatory framework. And it also enhances the collective kind of, posture and readiness. I'll just add this kind of item. It was just like bugging me. It was in my head. I needed to get it out. And I think that I can lend it to the trust system. So we probably need, across or throughout the region, a transparent individual and startup repository. So the thing is that when you're asking somebody in one place to do due diligence in the other place, it's very costly. It adds friction to, the investment. And yeah, also to be able to validate, trust in a person, trust in a company. So that's that for at least, this balancing of, trust and sovereignty.
One thing to add, Kate, as well. So looking at it from a startup angle, how we will be able to create. First of all, we have a lot of treaties signed between Eurasian countries and the GCC. So since we have a lot of treaties signed and FTAs, we will be able to leverage on that. So the way we need to look at it is from bottom to top approach. What does that mean? So if a startup is operating in Baku, let's say they go establish in Bahrain, we do have the regional AWS data host center over there where we will be able to leverage on that. And once we leverage on that, we will be able to have use cases to have multiple startups in terms of having these kind of data centers, or let's say leveraging on the data centers in AWS. And once we do that, then we will be able to go and pitch for the governments as use cases in order to have G2G initiatives with regards to any kind of cross-collaboration in terms of sandboxes, in terms of data protection laws. And once I think, and I believe we have these bilateral cross-border on a national scale, we will be able to have it on a regional scale eventually.
I may add just one point on the sovereignty bit. So today we've heard about Star Cloud, and people are trying to send satellites and put GPUs in the sky because they have sun and it's colder out there. And I think it's cold enough here, and you have enough energy. So building a sovereignty data center, I think with the AI war or the race to be the AGI or artificial superintelligence, the main scarce resource going to be energy and compute. So how much GPUs and how much compute you have and how much power do you have? You're blessed in this part of the world as much as the GCC with energy, but at the same time you have a colder weather. So it's a much better fit to build your own sovereignty data centers today, collect as much compute as you can, and make it as your center of excellence or your LLM testbed, or make it available for startups to build the next thing on a sovereignty way in your borders. At the same time, you get a geopolitical advantage, because in the future, it's about how much tokens are being allocated for you, right, to process, be it your autonomous cars or your guy who's sitting in the garage asking ChatGPT about the next startup that he want to build, and how you're going to prioritize these kind of tokens. So maybe I'm stating the obvious, but building enough data centers and compute in your countries can be a huge advantage on being sovereign, at the same time enabling startup ecosystem.
I want to follow up on this because you have such an insight and expertise on digital identity tech. And we mentioned it, it's been mentioned multiple times, unified digital market, data protection sandbox, individual startup directory, no dominance of single entity, regional cybersecurity alliance, and all of this. But it comes back to the shared digital identity, and that's a very sensitive topic because it holds a lot of private data. How do you see that in terms of building that unified digital market? What are some of the challenges or maybe insights that you want to share on it?
To be honest, now everything can be faked, as we know, especially in the digital world, right? So keeping your identity is a very complicated task. And the cybersecurity experts can tell you, to the extent that you can have deep fakes and you can have money transfer. I think the case was a $25 million transfer over a Zoom call with a CFO from a guy in Hong Kong. So he thought it's his CFO, where it was not his CFO, basically. So it's very difficult, and I've worked with a couple of startups right now that they are working on how they can create a signature or voice. Like even our voice right now can be faked, and they can make us say things that we're not saying on the stage, and how they can basically detect deep fakes. So this is very important. From government perspective, the challenge with the government that almost always they apply the maximum level of security no matter what you want to do with them. And that's where we created different grades of understanding of your identity based on what you want from the government. And this can be applied in the digital world. So for example, if I want to give a suggestion or a complaint to the government, I don't really care. They don't really care about my ID, right? They want to get the feedback. So I can tweet about them and they don't care about my ID. But if you ask me about my UE pass and my Emirates ID, if I want to file a complaint, I will be very hesitant to provide feedback. The second level, if you know that I already have a service, like I already have my ID, I want to renew my ID or my driving license, you don't really need much understanding of my ID because you already know everything. You have my fingerprints, you have all my details in your system. The third level is like if it's my first time in the UAE and I need to issue a new ID for you, I need your iris scan, I need your fingerprints, I need you to be present somewhere. And the third level, or the fourth level, which is the most complicated, is in a case that you're doing something that major. Let's say that you want to divorce your wife, God forbid, or you want to sell your properties to your newly wed 18 years old. So you need to appear in front of a notary public where you need to make sure that you're in straight mind, okay, and you know what you're doing. So applying these levels of understanding of your identity and what's the criticality of the task that you're doing, okay, and matching them, I think this is a key for making it usable and user-friendly. At the same time, it's providing the level of security and assurance required for the other party to trust you and give you the services.
Thank you. You know what they say, when you're having fun, time is passing by very quickly. And unfortunately, we are reaching the end. But the last but not least question, and then we hold the mic to someone else, because the topic is reuniting those markets and really creating one digital market out of it. What is one next step that you would recommend to be done to truly connect those markets and enable one digital united market? One of the steps. And I know you mentioned throughout the panel a few of them, but choose one.
To unify the market. So we've been talking about digital transformation. And so it's essentially, it feels to me almost like, you're trying to get investments for something that your investor wants. And I would wish for the region to sort of essentially establish its own thesis. So as far as where it wants to go. So there's the 0-day type of opportunity, which is, what do we do, to be able to match, your funds to our projects. But, I would love to see what type of new projects you would like to pursue for the future of the region. And so maybe, even digital transformation is a nomenclature that is evolving even now. So for example, things that you would not have called, part of digital transformation are now parts of digital transformation, especially the life sciences. And so in the region, there's a lot of STEM talent. And especially with AI going like vertical, there is an opportunity to essentially apply it, for example, in biotech, in health, medical, and the like. And so that's why I would love to be able to see like a new thesis that, comes out of where you want to lead the country. So you see what I mean? So you have these two parallel tracks. It's where everybody else is going, but where are you equipped singularly to be able to go? And so, the infrastructure that goes with it, is of course, plenty. So there's, you need to, leverage the compute, but then bring in, like we said, like the vertical capability and knowledge that the region possesses. Others may lack.
Those of you who are watching online live, take notes.
Yeah, so one of the things I would like to see is cross-collaboration among ecosystem enablers, for example, the incubators, the accelerators, where we will be able to have value-driven opportunities for the startups and the scale-ups to shine over basically both regions. And at the same time, which will lead, as Ibrahim mentioned earlier, in terms of having joint funds. So if we will summarize that, what we would like to see in the next year's time is we would like to have a set joint fund among ourselves, hopefully, inshallah, that we will be able to create value, create thesis for not just only inflows, but both actually inflows and outflows.
I would wear the startup hat now. So if the guys are paying the money here, I think what I will do.
Please speak for the people.
Yeah, for the people. So for the people, I will say that let's run it as a startup. So if these two regions want to collaborate and build something big, then everyone need to put on the table what they have. And what they have is they have the talents, they have the weather, they have the data center, we have the go-to-market strategy, we have the requirements, we have marketing skills. So it's like two co-founders are speaking about a startup, right? So we have the fund now. This is what you need to do. This is what I need to do. So what I think is you have a huge talent pool. It's amazing engineering house that I will, if I'm building a startup, I'm going to use your resources as my engineers, right? I'm going to build the branding and the go-to-market and the sales in Dubai because it's the launch pad to the world, or in Bahrain or in Saudi. It's not one size fit all. So this recipe might work for one startup, another startup might be the other way around. So I can be the engineering house in Saudi or in Bahrain, and then you can be my go-to-market into a different region, as long as the money is there.
Great. So no brain drain is made. And Ibrahim, please, your insight.
Yeah, it's very similar to what has been discussed. I would like to just say knowledge exchange, because in mainly government level, because one of the critical challenges in this regard is the legislative frameworks, which is like not similar to each other in terms of Kazakhstan, in terms of Uzbekistan, in terms of Azerbaijan, or in terms of any like GCC country. So I believe knowledge exchange in this regard, where government exchange the ideas how to make the legislation better and how to make each legislation similar to each other. So the startups or the companies will not face problem when they go to another country would be an interesting starting point.
Thank you so much. And like this, we need to wrap up. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, speakers.